I want to talk about a program, a very important program, and probably the most dangerous program, one of the most dangerous programs that the government has. But first I have to talk about the man that created the program. You know his name. His name is J. Edgar Hoover, and he ran the FBI from 1924, when it was called the Bureau of Investigation, until 1972, when he died of a heart attack. He ran it for 48 years under 6 presidents. He was feared by the people under him and the people over him. A lot of presidents wanted to get rid of J. Edgar Hoover and could not. Rumor has it he had some files that they did not want exposed. J. Edgar Hoover was very upset with the Supreme Court because they got in the way of the Bureau's ability to prosecute people for their political beliefs. He was pissed because the Supreme Court did their jobs. At the time, pretty much everyone in government was afraid of a communist revolution. Ever since 1917, the Russian Revolution shook all of the authorities in America that one day communism would arrive, and it's part of the reason why they eradicate communism at any chance they can get, whether it's real or not. Hoover was one of these believers that behind everything lies a communist revolution. He saw red in everything, and he used it and trumped up everything as a communist plot. With that in mind, in 1956, he started a program you may have heard of called Cointelpro. How many of you heard of Cointelpro? Fair amount of hands. This is coming to light now. In 1956, he starts this program. It's called Cointelpro, stands for Counterintelligence Program. Now, what the program was meant to do was everything illegal and unauthorized. It was to tap phones. It was to spread newsletters, to spread rumors. It was to put informants inside of activists and different faction groups that they did not believe had the U.S. best interests in mind, and break them up by any means possible. Would you believe that they had hands in murder as well, and actually murdering activists? Oh yeah, right? So a few things they did: mailed a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King encouraging him to commit suicide. They also mailed tapes of Dr. King with the women he was having extramarital affairs with to his wife, Coretta Scott King. They had been watching Malcolm since 1953, and in 1964, Edgar Hoover sends a memo to his New York office and says, "Do something about Malcolm X. Do something about Malcolm X." The next year, February 21st, when Malcolm's assassinated, they get one assassin. His name is Thomas Hare, and he goes to jail, and they arrest 2 other people. These 2 other people confess that they were in another place. They have alibis. There's evidence that they were never at the crime scene in the hall where Malcolm was murdered. Thomas Hare, years later, actually writes a letter, a signed affidavit, that says there were 5 people. I was one, the other 4 are still at large, and the 2 men that you have incarcerated are not guilty. This was true. There's a mound of evidence. They never reopened the investigation. We find out years later that Eugene Roberts, who was the head of Malcolm X security, was a police informant. He was there the night that Malcolm was shot. He even tried, in his shock, to give Malcolm mouth to mouth, although he had been hit with shotgun shells in his chest. In 1968, Hoover sends a memo, and he says, "It is time for everyone to redouble their efforts and focus on the Black Panther Party. We have to prevent the rise," in his words, "of a black messiah who could unite the different activist factions in this country and change government." His words, black messiah who could unite the activists and apparently pull off a communist revolution. We know that the Black Panthers now did breakfast programs for children, free breakfast programs. We know that they did health services, socialist health services for the community that was not provided for poor people at the time. We know these things. And when the San Francisco office objected to Hoover, mildly objected, by the way, that these breakfast programs, it would look bad if they broke up these breakfast programs as he instructed and such. He said that the breakfast programs are the most dangerous part of their programs and must be undone. In 1967, they opened a file on a man named Fred Hampton. How many of you heard of Fred Hampton? That's not bad. They opened a file on Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton is moving up the ranks in the Black Panther Party. He's a local activist in Chicago. He rises to the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party. Now, what the FBI typically did with their informants and their misinformation were to trump up charges for different activists to get them to go to court. So they'd spend all of their money and funds in court fighting charges that didn't make any sense. But a lot of them went to jail. A lot of Black Panthers leaders went to jail for decades before they were exonerated, before we found out that the witnesses were FBI agents or that it was just simply made up. They would go through any means. What they tried with Fred Hampton was they charged him with armed robbery and assault. They alleged that he assaulted and robbed an ice cream truck driver for $71 worth of ice cream, and alleged that he handed it out to the children after. So apparently he was a dangerous ice cream thief who handed out ice cream to children. But the most serious, scary thing that the FBI pulled off was a raid on December 4th of 1969. The night before, Fred Hampton had given a political education at a church in his neighborhood. So him and the rest of the Panthers went back to his apartment that he shared with his fiancée, Deborah Johnson, and his head of security, William O'Neill, cooked meals for everyone and made drinks. And everyone stayed over, all of the Panthers, as is tradition. William O'Neill left early, but everyone else stayed. At one point, Fred is talking to his mother on the phone and falls asleep in the middle of the conversation, which everyone finds very strange. The night goes on, everyone goes to sleep. There's a knock at the door, 4:30 in the morning. It's the police. They knock. They don't wait long. They kick in the door, and they immediately start shooting. They come in with guns blazing. They know exactly where Fred's bedroom is, which is baffling. They kick down the door to Fred's bedroom. Of course they're shooting. Fred is laying next to his fiancée, who is 8.5 months pregnant. At one point, she tries to roll over to protect Fred. They throw her off. They throw her out the room. Fred has been shot. The Panthers hear the police in the room, drag him out of the bed and say, "That's Fred Hampton, that's him. Is he dead?" They hear 2 more shots. And the police officer says, "He's good and dead now." They drag Fred Hampton out of the building. And the police are unprofessional. They're laughing. They're cocky. They're so damn cocky that they fail to secure a crime scene. They do not lock the apartment. They do not tape anything off. They leave it completely open. After this, the Panthers come through, and they realize that something wrong went on, obviously. Not only do they survey the crime scene with their lawyer to see that the aggression was on the police, they invite the community to come through and tour the crime scene. And everyone sees, and they show them, point by point. All of these shots came from police officers. This is where they murdered Chairman Fred. This is where they said this happened, but this did not happen. The DA's name is Edward Hanrahan. He has it out for the Black Panthers. He's aspiring. He wants to rise up. I'm sure he wants to be governor or president or whatever the hell. So he has it in for them. He reports that all of this is false, that it was a shootout, that when they came in the door, the Panthers fired on them first, and they had no choice but to fire back. He even set up a mock map and had cameras come in, set up a floor plan in an empty stage, and had the cops walk through everything that they did. He pushed open the door here. We saw that there's a woman with a shotgun. She shot at us. We saw her face by the light of the shotgun, and that's how we know it was her. It went over our heads. We shot at the Panthers. We tried not to shoot anybody. This is how it went. We're good cops. Edward Hanrahan says that his police, by the grace of God, were not killed. We know that these Panthers are violent. We know what they do to people. I can't believe you would question this. In fact, here's a picture of the door frame. Look at these bullet holes we circled. There's 3 bullet holes. This is evidence of the Panthers firing at the police. Well, the Panthers took pictures of these bullet holes, and they showed them to the press. And it turns out these 3 scary bullet holes all were nail heads. There were nail heads in the wall. Hanrahan was so confident, so brazen, so clearly confident that he could murder black activists with impunity and that no one would question him. The trial, actually they convened a grand jury. The grand jury finds that there were 100 witnesses who were not called, potential witnesses who were not called for this trial. They find that 99 of the shots in the apartment were fired from police and 1 from the Panthers. The shot from the Panther was Mark Clark, who was sitting guard with a shotgun. They kicked down the door, they shot him in the heart. In his dying fall, his shotgun went off and went through the roof. No shot was fired at a policeman in this entire time, and this was proof. Despite this, the grand jury says that they cannot find probable cause or that civil rights were violated. Now, how did they get the floor plan and know exactly where Chairman Fred was? Well, it turns out William O'Neill, who gave Fred Hampton barbiturates so that he would sleep through the raid, made everyone dinner and left early that night, had been a federal informant the entire time. They had felony charges on William O'Neill, and this is how they got informants. And they said, if you give us info on the Black Panthers as you rise up through the ranks, we will completely take care of your record, and you'll never go to jail. He got a $300 bonus for providing the blueprint to his FBI informant. William O'Neill was torn up by this because he did not believe that they would go in and simply murder Fred Hampton in his sleep. Many years later, he came back to Chicago, even though he was under witness protection, and ran out of his uncle's house onto the Eisenhower Freeway and is struck by a car, and they ruled it as a suicide, which it most likely was. Now, the only reason we know about Cointelpro, because I am no conspiracy theorist, and say this many times, is a brave band of people in 1971, led by a physicist teacher consisting of a daycare worker and a religious school teacher, broke into the FBI office in Media outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and stole the FBI files. They were never, ever, ever caught. They outed themselves many years later. J. Edgar Hoover tried everything he could to find these people and could not. That's how we know about Cointelpro. Now, here's the thing to think about in all of this. Like I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do think that the government does conspire. The question is, if the federal government is often willing to bend the rules of democracy in the name of democracy, what kind of democracy is that? We're not talking about conspiracies. What we need to talk about is pattern. You should pursue the information diligently. If you get information, you should pursue it diligently and investigate and make sure that it's solid. But what I'm asking you right now is to think about the patterns. What is the pattern when the government is faced with a revolution? What is the pattern when the government is faced with people who are challenging the status quo? What have you seen in Portland in which people exercising democracy and their rights and challenging the government? How has the government responded? And who does the government work for? And that's it.